Megan's
Proud
gonna
of
put
us.
us on the map.
That's right. Thank you, Megan. Okay. Megan just comes in with all kinds of crazy hot takes. We're like, ooh. And then I will read your bio, and that's when you can come in, and then we'll talk to you.
Magically appear.
We will conjure you. It'll be like Beetlejuice. We'll say your name 3 times, and you just like pop in.
That feels right. This is like we have a supreme talent here with us. I wanted to mention something to you because this morning I got a text from like a from a mom who's like a mom in my 4th graders class, and they're doing like a poetry unit. And so she texted me being like, they're doing this poetry thing, and I know like you're a poet, and like wouldn't that be just so amazing if like you went and talked to the class? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like they have like a returning poet every year. It's like Mr. Buttons or something. It's like but
who
then
has sold
like,
more books than we have, I'm sure of it. I'm so
like
positive.
I'm not sure you know what you're asking of me. Like I'm gonna come in with like a flashlight under my chin and be like, don't become a poet. Let me tell you.
Hello, 8-year-olds. Would you like to know about postpartum depression? Like,
I'll be like, there is a serial plagiarizer in the land by the name of John Puchera. He's everywhere, and nobody knows who he is.
Icon.
I'm not so sure you want me to talk to 4th graders about poetry. I'm not sure that I'm the poster child of
It would be so good. It would be great. And then another thing about these careerists, like getting all mad. Just like this bitter old person yelling.
You know, David Lehman put himself in the best American poetry again. Not only is today a special day with our special guest, but tonight is a special night because tonight is debate night.
Oh my gosh.
And you know what they say in my house? Debate night be date night.
Nothing is hotter than political debates. That is the aphrodisiac.
Light a candle. I get out my little Hillary action figure. I'm so excited. All good things today.
My. All right, well, let's kick this off. Welcome everybody to Table for Deuce, where we shoot the shit about all things lit. With me, with her Table for Deuce cup, which I have also brought. Look at this, matchy. With me is co-founder Kate Hanson Foster, who is the author of 2 collections of poems, Crow Funeral, as well as Midriff, a finalist for the Massachusetts Center for the Book Award. Her writing has appeared in Birmingham Poetry Review, Comstock Review, Harper Palette, Poet Lore, Salamander, Tupelo Quarterly, and elsewhere. Very talented, very well-published, amazing writer. A recipient of the NEA Parent Fellowship through the Vermont Studio Center. She lives and writes in Groton, Massachusetts. And little known fact, on weekends, Kate is actually the lead singer to a Marilyn Manson cover band and goes by the moniker Marilyn Hanson. So welcome goth alt rock star / poet Kate Hanson Foster to the table.
Well, I am here with co-host Michael Schmeltzer, editor-in-chief of Floating Bridge Press, award-winning poet, and you know, I was gonna like go on and on about all of your accolades because last time I went on too long and I made you look way better than me. So I'm gonna cut that part.
You really did. Yeah, that was too much.
I am excited about your new temp job though, that you've been talking about. That you can't stop talking about. So Michael has a new temp job this fall as an election interference interceptor. And I don't know what that means really. But I know he's been going on and on about his new mega freedom scanner and his deep state decoder technology and all this kind of stuff. It's really exciting for Michael, and I'm so happy.
I'm just trying to keep democracy alive, Kate. I'm sorry you're one of those fascists.
Well, you know, I hope you get some extra money. We can throw it to
I actually just get my pillows just sent to my house every month. So, but yeah, I am excited. I am excited for this new season. I am excited. We have acceptances rolled out to some poets over at The Seat, which is our new journal that we've started. Our full website will be coming out at the end of September. So we've been working on that all summer. Gosh, what else have we been doing? I don't know. Everything else has been like crumbling and just like on fire in my life. But Table for Deuce in The Seat,
On
fantastic.
fire in a good way.
Yeah, but it's been a good summer-ish. Good enough, better than last summer. I don't know. I don't know, man. There's problems. But what's not a problem? I know I got a lot of things to
We'll
work
do
through
a
right now,
breakout therapy room
obviously.
later.
That's right. But no, but I'm excited to get this season started because we are kicking it off strong with a wonderful guest today, which I would like to start off and introduce. So we have Meghan Merchant. Meghan Merchant is the owner of the editing, manuscript consultation, and mentoring business Shiver Song and holds an MFA degree in international creative writing from UNLV. She's a visual artist, and beautiful artwork, by the way, which we will send up links, but everyone should check out her work. She's a visual artist and the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, Gravel Ghosts, The Dark's Humming, and Grief Flowers. She's also the author of 4 chapbooks and a children's book, These Words I Shaped for You, out at Penguin Random House. Her book, Before the Fevered Snow, was released in 420 with Stillhouse Press. It was a NYT New and Noteworthy. She was awarded the 2016-2017 SCOG Literary Award, judged by Juan Felipe Herrera, the 2018 this I don't know how to pronounce it. I am terrible this morning, but the Bella Rose Poetry Prize, second place in the Pablo Neruda Prize for Poetry, the inaugural Michelle Bousseau Prize, and most recently the New American Poetry Prize. So obviously, once again, we like to invite people that are way more talented than us, way more prestigious and lovely and fantastic and talented. She is the editor of Perrine's Fountain, and you can find her poetry and artwork at meganmerchant.wix.com/poet. Please welcome Meghan Merchant.
Hey, thank you.
Woo!
Super happy to be here hanging out with you two.
Oh my gosh, we are so happy to have you. And it's like there are all these times, and I do this with Kate as well, where it's like when I actually look at their bio, it's just like, oh my gosh, you are accomplished, you are talented, you've done things. And it's so odd because it seems like a small community a lot of the times, and you just kind of get to know someone, and you chit chat, and you forget like, wow, we are surrounded by some really, really smart, amazing people. So it's nice to have you on the show, Meghan.
Well, thanks. Great way to start the day. My children would say the opposite. They'd be like, Mom, you didn't do this, clean this shirt for me this morning, or what is this breakfast? So it's, it's kind of cool to be like, yeah, I've done things.
I've,
For sure.
I've done, I do things in my time when I'm not parenting,
Yeah.
I was trying to
It is.
explain to my husband about Meghan. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, Meghan is like having like an EGOT like artist on, and he's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "It's like she won an Emmy, an Oscar, a Tony, and a Grammy. Like, she's like
Right.
an artist, a musician, like poet. I have her children's book. I'm gonna have to edit in the picture of Maeve when she was like really little reading that book. But also too, when I bought one of your journals,
Oh, yeah.
it's like which has like, I mean, it's the artwork is just I couldn't help myself. The only problem I'm having though is that like I'm like I don't want to soil this like with my dark thoughts. I feel like bring myself to write in it. I'm like I'm gonna ruin it with myself.
I have
And
a whole bookcase of journals back there where I was like scared to write, and I started and then slammed it shut and was like, nope, not good enough for this journal. So
yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Meghan, I would actually love to start off by asking you about your visual art. Like how did you now I know it says you have an MFA in creative writing. Did the art come first? Were you an artist before that? Were you an artist after that? Like how did the visual art start with you?
I have no professional training
Oh,
whatsoever. Yes. So
wow.
I actually started to paint when we were in quarantine and I was homeschooling my children.
Mhm.
And for the first time in my life, I couldn't write, which was really strange for me. I've written through miscarriages, through my son's speech loss, my mother's death, all of these really hugely traumatic events in my life. And then
Mhm.
we were, going through COVID and stuck in the house, and everything just kind of shut down for me. And so I was like, I need a new relationship with image. I need something to keep this alive. And I'd always wanted to try painting. So while my kids were doing their lessons and on Zoom, I was just sitting next to them making beautiful masterpieces, like paint everywhere. It was chaos. And it was so much fun. And it kind of grew from there. I have taken a few classes online for collage. I haven't taken a painting class yet, which I actually started this portrait class and I didn't realize it was like super advanced. And I went into it, and the first class just was looking at what everyone was doing. And they were looking at my work going, well, it's very cartoonish. And we were using the live model on Zoom, and I was like, trying to see all the fine details on this tiny little Zoom screen. It was terrible. And so I bailed very quickly, and was like, no, I need some dignity here. So I maybe will take a painting class in the future. I don't know yet. But yeah, I am obsessed with visual arts. I've always wanted to try it and just decided why not.
Do you have like artists in your family too? Visual artists or
My cousin, Chris Chahosky, is this genius. I mean, absolute brilliant genius. And he does these large scale installations. He's in Palm Springs or Palm Desert. And you can, if you Google him, you can find his website and some of the stuff he's been doing. But he is, I bow down. He's so cool. He's so much cooler than I am. But yes, he is one of the artists in my family.
Yeah, we're gonna have him on instead if you could just
yeah.
contact
You
him.
should.
You
No,
know?
he's absolutely brilliant, and he's very funny and entertaining and very smart.
So I've been reading some of the interviews that you've done over the past years and things like that. And one of the things I really respect about you is it basically seems like you are a creator. Like it always seems like you're working on different things. You're not just like a poet with a capital P. You are this person who is writing, and it's not just poetry. It's also children's books, and then it's like these different kind of topics. And you're also part of the business that you run, the Shiver Song, and you do like that writing from that end, editorial kind of lens. And then now with the collage and visual arts, it's just like there are always things coming out of you and like all these things that you seem to be processing. Have you noticed when you started with the visual arts and things, does it change the way you write or think about writing?
It gives me a break from writing.
Mm.
The difference in creating visual art versus sitting down and writing a poem. When I'm sitting down to write a poem, it's almost this really painful experience, like it's coming from my body. And it's really loud in my head, and I have to try to focus in and then allow certain things in, shut other things down. But when I'm creating visual art, it's this like la la land of happiness and unicorns and rainbows. And it's all in my imagination. And it's so quiet. And so it allows me that break from poetry so that when I go back to it, I feel more prepared to enter that space. I feel like I can greet that space with a little more enthusiasm than sitting down and, squaring off with the blank page and being like, oh, here we go. But yeah, visual arts is just like, what if I glue this here? What if I make this red? And it's really fun.
what a gift to have that kind of outlet just to separate yourself from the poetry a bit. I feel that way a bit when I write like reviews. Like it's just
Mhm.
exercising a different mindset and kind of but yeah, see, I feel exactly the same way. Like writing poetry is a very difficult process. Like I have to get into like I literally have to lock into another place, another level somewhere in my brain where maybe some good words live, but not always. And you're supremely talented at both. So
Thank you.
Congratulations, Megan. Okay.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, you won the lottery. You're great at everything. Thanks a lot.
Oh no, I can't
Dead at
cook.
everything.
I am terrible at laundry. Like life's basics, I fail miserably. So yeah, no, I work with different poets. I'm working with 11 poets right now doing mentorships, and this is a common theme. They're like, when's it gonna get easier? And it's like it's not. I'm really sorry. Like this is just it.
Yeah.
Writing poetry is really, really hard.
Yeah, it seems to get harder too. Like the more you learn and the more you know, it's like you realize the less you actually do know overall. And there's just so many different ways to like get into a poem, and you just like realize there's just a lot to learn. And which is kind of great about it. Like it has never been boring. And I've been writing for, 20 something years, and it just always feels exciting when I am at the page and ready to do something. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know if I've learned as much as I should have by now. I feel like I should have a better grasp of things. But like you said, Kate, when I write reviews, that is also a different like relief. It's still in that space, but it's a different part of my brain I get to use. And it does give me access to poems and appreciation of poems in a different way.
The approach to writing changes so much as we get older. And like we
Mhm.
had, I don't know, a few episodes ago, we had a long talk about like hormones and writing. And I feel like I wrote differently like as a younger woman than I do now. And I do think like so much of our bodies, like our inner chemistries sort of comes into how we approach writing. And now, I mean, I find it harder, or maybe I'm not moved so much by the way I was when I was younger. It's almost like with music too, I'm kind of like, like have I listened to every good song? Like I just need something new, something fresh, like where like when we were younger, everything felt so exciting, discovering a new poet or like
Mhm.
a new amazing album and stuff. And so it's kind of, I don't know, it's different now. That kind of leads into like the next question that I wanted to get into, which is sort of your journey through these books that you have written. And one thing I was talking to Michael about the other day when we were talking about you is that like your voice as a poet, despite like you could see, these sort of life events that you're navigating through, your voice has remained so solid and distinct and authentic and just I find that so admirable. And I was just curious if that was hard for you, if you can maybe talk a little bit about maybe how your approach or your mindset has changed through each collection.
When I was in graduate school, my professor was talking about, my voice in the poem and said it was sure-footed like a goat. Sure-footed like a goat. I carry that with me. I try to be as sure-footed as possible in each poem. But yeah, I think for me what changes is and we're talking about, that embodied experience and how your life shifts and changes, and then when you approach the page, it's with a different kind of urgency. And for me, the urgency isn't the need to sit down and write, but it's what do I have left to say? Like what is of importance right now? What's of meaning? What wisdom can I actually share? And that's where my struggle is. I'm not, it's interesting. I don't really pay much attention to voice. Um, I just try to be as authentic as possible in every poem that I approach and figure out what it is that I have to share.
What you're saying is absolutely correct, and it's not something that you can explain because it just is. I love your work because it is so lyrical, and I love lyrical poetry very much. But something about your work, it's like it's sure-footed like a goat. but it,
Sure.
but there are other poets I would say who might read work like yours and admire it and give it a go for themselves. And it's almost like they're like, I want to create that clock, that Megan Merchant created. And so they just throw a bunch of gears in, and they deliver a clock, but it's still like a broken clock. And it's because they're trying so hard and, really like going too hard on metaphors or too hard on obscurity or, or innuendo or whatever it may be. And you can see behind the curtain of what went wrong or maybe why it isn't working. And I just think that, you know, your work is so impressive in the way that you just read it and it's like, okay, yeah, it's just pure. It's just there. It's, you know, natural to you.
I
Thank
think one of the things that you said, Megan, that really struck a chord with me is how you said just basically almost sounded like waiting to make sure that you had something to say rather than putting yourself out there. I mean, if you wanted to, you could write the same poem 50 times and get a handful of those published and just keep getting your name out there, out there, out there. But I feel like you really have a certain kind of respect and a different kind of pacing to the idea of writing than some poets might in this kind of day and age. It's a very hectic kind of publishing cycle. And it's like, if you think about like Timu or Sheen and those kind of places, they talk about fast fashion like this, you know, and all that. And I feel like it's the same thing with poetry a lot of the times is you need to get a poem out there and you need to be talked about as often as possible. With you, I feel like there is the sense of really taking your time with each piece. And like, if you want to call it sure-footedness or talk about authenticity and things like that, I think you really have a way of saying something with each like book and each poem that you write. You are making sure that you are saying something and not just repeating something you've said previously. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of admire that and kind of shout that out, because I think that is something that's hard to do in this day and age, especially with social media the way it is and the way kind of attention is these days. I think having that patience is really crucial.
Thank you. I think it's interesting because there's a bit of a juxtaposition for me in hearing that because I think a lot of why I create is so that I don't disappear. You know,
Mhm.
as a mother, like when you become a mother, all of a sudden people just don't even bother to learn your name. You go to
Mhm.
doctor's appointments, you go to, you know, anything to do with your child, and there's like, okay, mom, all right, mom. And then
Mhm.
that disappears. And then as a female of a certain age in our society, I am invisible, which is a blessing. And I don't know,
Yeah.
an interesting thing to navigate at the same time. And
Mhm.
so it's an interesting juxtaposition for me because I do feel that pressure to try to put myself out there. But at the end of the day, I've come to the realization that when I'm creating, it's so I don't disappear in my own life, not necessarily out in the world or, you know, in a journal or um, through publishing or through presenting artwork, but just in my own sphere, in my own space, in my own body.
It's a good lesson to all of us, I think, to,
Mhm.
you know, not to disappear for yourself. It doesn't have anything to do with social media, doesn't have to do with publishing creds, but stay present within yourself. Well, we should talk about the new book and there's like so many interesting themes and stuff that I'm dying to talk about. Do we want to lead with a poem or
Yeah, we definitely should, I think. Now that we've been talking about the poems and their sure-footedness, I'm sure the audience would love to hear something.
And I'll read this and you guys will be like, this is not so sure-footed. I will start with this one here. They promised that you were set apart for something holy. Did you dream about oceans while you were mud stuck in the Mississippi? Something you couldn't see the banks of, like faith, salt, birdwing, a weekday sneak of sour wine. You were all scripture and scrub oak, miracles that profited man. On Sundays, I open the dictionary, look for words you might have hummed, words that will peel the generations between us. Are your eyes hazel? Do they shift in the onslaught of spring? The blue of needing another body to remind you of your own? Did you feel desire, but give it your husband's name?
I love this idea of kind of reaching back to our ancestors, which you know, we should be a little upfront here. Michael and I are so eager to get you on our show that the book hasn't officially come out yet. So we have like, you know, we have the poems that you sent us and we have what we've read online and everything and obviously like absolutely love these poems. But I feel like I want like I am so this is the first time where we've had somebody on where I'm like, I want more. Like how do like and I can't get it yet. I'm really but I did want to put that out there. And so you know, we're on the I'm sure you're gonna be super busy when is the book going to be released? Officially?
October 1st.
Okay, so it's just weeks away. And actually, by the time the show drops, it'll be days away.
Mhm.
So I'm so excited for this book. I can't even. But can you talk a little bit about why, you felt like you needed to sort of look back at these generations before you and, sort of, I look at it when I try and do that in my writing or when I think about trying to do it, sometimes I do feel like I'm just another version of someone who came before me. I have the Kate stuff inside, but there's also like so much more that like is in my DNA that I don't even know how to put a word to. Could you, talk about that? Like what maybe inspired you to go there and
Absolutely. So it started with my grandfather. Um, he was in World War II and he wrote these really beautiful letters home to his wife every day, sometimes twice a day. And I was finally gifted these letters. I'd been asking them for quite a while. And my father and I spent about 4 years transcribing them because they were written on wax paper in cursive and pencil. And it was a tedious process. And we just didn't want to lose that history. And my grandfather was an absolutely beautiful writer. And so I was very drawn to these letters. And so we spent 4 years transcribing them. And then a new batch of letters came in the mail from a family member. And I started reading one of them. And it really sounded a lot like the last transmission from the Mars rover, where it was like, it is cold and dark and my battery is getting low. And I was like, this is not my grandfather. I have no idea what
Mhm.
this is. And so it's an entirely different voice and different handwriting. And so my father and I began to try to figure it out, and then we learned about Hortensia, who is my grandfather's great grandmother. And something inside of me just absolutely sparked when I read this letter, and I was like, I need to know everything that I can about her. And so luckily, she was a female, and she was part of the Mormon church. And her voice was actually preserved. And so her letters are available if you dig through some of the archives. And I was in shock to
Wow.
figure it out. And I was like, I have to know this story. And in speaking with my family members and reading her correspondence, she had traveled with Joseph Smith to Nauvoo, Illinois, and helped set up that community there. And then when Joseph Smith was murdered and Brigham Young came into power and instituted polygamy, she took her entire family, left that community that she was just such a part of, and went to settle Magnolia, Iowa. One of like 5 families, I think, that made that trip. And so these letters are dire and they're beautiful, and there's so much emphasis and surety in them about her spirituality and her choices. And she was so empowered and had so much agency that I couldn't not correspond with her. I spent an entire month, I locked myself in my office every day for about 3 hours and just started writing letters to her to figure out maybe what we had in common, what I wanted to know, how thinking about how she would see me as a human being in this day and age as a female. And I have such respect for the choices that she made that I felt like these letters are kind of in service to that part of my ancestry, and the part that um speaks to the feminine agency of having these choices, which didn't really exist in her day and age. So,
That brings up a question for me. Like when you're reading these letters and you find this kind of connection between generations in the past, do you think about what you're writing is leaving for your own children?
yes. And in the second book I have coming out, actually, with Luke Johnson, they are letter poems. I think I asked that question quite a bit about what I am leaving behind for my children, because my voice as a poet is very different than my mom voice.
Mhm.
And I would love to be present when my oldest son finally picks up one of my books and sits down to read it. And he's going to be like, what?
Yeah.
That moment you realize that your parents are adults and people, individuals with their own lives and fears and desires and,
Yeah,
all
that
those
they're actually
embarrassing things.
human.
I'm really curious to see kind of how they navigate that terrain and if they even pay attention to it or if they're just like, yeah, that's just my mom, whatever.
This is kind of a bit of a random question, but I noticed in the couple poems that you sent from this collection that the form is sort of like in a justified alignment. They're like these perfect little squares, and it's interesting now to think that this was sort of like a correspondence that you were creating with, like, with a family member. Was there a conscious choice of that kind of form?
Yeah, and normally I shy away from prose poems. I love enjambment. I love line breaks. I love playing with that container. One of the things that I have had to learn how to do is figure out how to edit my own work. I'm not really part of a larger writer community. I have friends that I can call upon and be like, oh, is this a good choice? Is this not a good choice in this poem? But I had to really sit down and figure out why I was making the choices I was. And one of the things that I teach and one of the things that I do in my own work is I find what I refer to as the wisdom of the poem. And that's kind of a long thing. It's a little bit more than your thesis statement or your main point, but the wisdom is what actually shapes the container for me. And so in thinking about the wisdom of these poems, about what I was saying, where the emotional impact of the poem was living and what that felt like, it felt like it needed to be tidy and very clean. They were a mirror too. I mean, I literally wrote all of these poems in a month.
Oh,
Sitting in
wow.
this office, which I have these square windows and I'm in this square space, and it was in this really, compartmentalized time in my life here. So it felt like a
Right.
nice mirror for that.
Do we want to read another one?
Let's do it.
I'll have her read the
Do
next
it.
one.
Exodus. Milk froths over, feathery in a glazed mug. I watch a woodpecker forget the geography of air, churn in the invisible, then flee. I feel silence to mean what's missing, never shapeless. Some days, love. Another round of snow arriving, another mistake I'll settle into as understanding more about what I've become. I'm looking for the word that falls between almost and touch. That consideration. It has its own airspace. The gap where the juniper was chopped is a frame now. If only the light would enter, I could trick myself into believing it was heat.
That last line, I love the if only the light would enter, I could trick myself into believing it was heat, is just such a beautiful line. And like there are moments in both the poems that you read that just not just for the content, but like Megan had already or Kate had already mentioned kind of the lyricality and the musicality of your work. I mean, like the Weekday Sneak just has such a great mouth feel. What was the other one? Geography of Air. Like these are all just these beautiful sounding, like just they just feel great to say. Is music a part of your life? Are you a like do you like singing? Are you a choir person? Like what? Because there seems to be a lot of music in your lines, and hopefully that's what I steer towards when I read. And I'm just wondering if that is something that's very conscious that you do. Are you a musician? Are you a, what's your background there?
I play the ukulele. I play
Okay.
the guitar terribly, and only like two songs because I had to give up lessons because time and having to make choices. But no, I've always had this affinity for language and a way of wanting to play with it so that I can figure out how to make somebody feel something without directly saying it, in the most lyrical way possible. I I'm absolutely obsessed with some elements of music. My son plays the cello, he played the violin, he plays classical piano, and so our environment, our landscape is always singing. We sing in the car, we sing in the kitchen, we dance in the kitchen. We will play on the back porch frequently if I have family or friends visiting who are musicians. We'll come and we'll just jam on the back porch. And some of it's terrible and some of it's wonderful, but it's music. And so it's a whole other way of feeling, of accessing this life that I find really moving and beautiful, and language is no exception to that.
And that line, I am looking for the word that falls between almost and touch. That consideration, it has its own airspace. I have probably read that line over and over and over since you sent it. And to me, it is the line. Like it is, there's something what you're pointing to that we all understand as poets are and trying to capture this feeling, this moment, this idea, and knowing that even if we try, or even if we, if we get it, it's always impermanent. Like you could have said something like, I am looking for that word that lives between, the almost in touch, but that word falls between it. And I loved how there's just this, I don't know, like it's something you got to catch before you lose it, or otherwise it's gone. And that, I feel that I relate to that so much just in my own writing and even in, reading poetry stuff that a poet can capture that for you and it lives in you for, just a little, hot second and then it's gone. But that hot second is so good.
I'm always looking for those moments, always. I think I'm writing about that moment in every single poem in a different way. And sometimes I feel I'm just like, oh, there it is again. But I'm always looking for those moments. I'm on the hunt for them.
There was something in an interview that I read, and I forget what phrase it was, but it was basically kind of those stitching together of things that you had talked about. And so that line feels particularly powerful when thinking about like just that kind of in-between space, that kind of connective space between two things. And like once you become, we're all parents here, and once you become a parent, there's that moment where you're still someone else's child, but you're also the parent of a child. And so you live in that kind of connective space as well. Is there a connective piece between your books that you find, or is each book kind of its own individual unit?
That's a great question. The themes do carry over quite frequently, but they seem to be their own moments in time. Before the Fevered Snow, I wrote when my mother had a misdiagnosed brain tumor that they thought was Alzheimer's, some weird form of Alzheimer's, where she lost her sight and her memories. So that book kind of lives in that space and time, but the themes, and there's certainly echoes throughout each of the books, like landscape, birds, relationships, motherhood, love. I would say they're moments in time, but that they share really common themes.
Reading your book, there's definitely, or reading your work, there's birds, there's earth, there's landscape, there's just kind of these down to earth, really relatable things that just sort of reaching into the space around you to be able to formulate what it is that you're trying to say. And that I would say, just as, a fan of your work and not answering Michael's question for you, but I feel like that is something very consistent.
By all means, please.
Actually, I just want to cut Meghan off and let her know that
what Meghan really means.
Exactly.
She likes birds. She likes birds. And she's not.
I like birds. I like birds.
She likes birds.
Absolutely. It's just trying to be present with the everyday and my surroundings and the people and the objects and the creatures that are, gracing my life with such beauty and meaning.
I do love the multiple threads in the interviews that I read where they're like, are you a fan of Emily Dickinson? And you're always like, I read some. So that is like my favorite thing. But no, you talk about Anne Sexton is the name that comes up quite frequently, and I love the story about how you was it how you got into like a workshop or something like that.
My
But
first creative writing poetry workshop ever, which I wasn't qualified to take. I didn't have the prerequisites. And so I had to go and talk to the professor, who, the beautiful poet and human being, Aliki Barnstone, who I knew nothing about at the time. I mean, I was just like, I've been writing poems and want to be in your poetry class. And so she was so sweet, and she was like, well, just tell me like who you're reading right now. And I owned one book, poetry, one, and it was Anne Sexton. So I was like, Anne Sexton's collected works.
yeah.
Collected,
Like,
all of them.
yeah, like all the poems in there. And so she was like, well, any fan of Anne Sexton is welcome in my classroom. And then I found out later that Anne Sexton wrote the foreword to her first book.
Oh, wow.
So yes.
Like a
And then
beautiful moment.
Did the ultimate name drop. You like completely nailed it. Bullseye.
yeah,
Wow, you should. I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but Anne Sexton,
Anne
like this.
Sexton, like whatever. She saved me again, and after graduate school, I went to become a yoga instructor, and I created this whole I couldn't leave poetry behind though. So I created this whole system that wove poems with the asana practice, using the breath sequence like paired to the syllable count of the poem, because I am super nerdy. And so I tore my labrum and my rotator cuff in my left shoulder. And at the time, I'd been feeling really down about not writing and not really engaging in poetry. And I was like, oh, I just did this grad school program and now I'm not doing anything. And the book that I had written was just sitting there. And so 6 months before I injured this, my husband was like, enroll in an online workshop. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was staying home, teaching yoga, raising my firstborn child, feeling like pretty down in the dumps. And so I was like, confessional poetry. I'm feeling it. And so I enrolled in this confessional workshop, and then I injured myself. And the very same day that they brought this horrific machine to my house, it was a mobility chair that moved my arm for me that I had to sit in for 6 hours a day. The workshop started. And so like the universe literally was like, take a seat, young lady, go back to Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath and keep writing poetry.
That is amazing. That is like just kind of wild moments of destiny right there. That reminds me that segues nicely to your next piece that I would like you to read, Origin Story. Even though it's not quite the superhero origin story that is what we heard, basically, it sounds like, but I would love to hear this. And this is your collaboration, correct, with
Yes.
poet Mr. California, Luke Johnson, as we like to call him.
Yes, you will hear him in here as L. So that is who that is for. But yes, this is included in A Slow Indwelling, which is coming out this fall as well with Harbor Editions. Origin Story. My son stands at the morning kitchen, asks, how were people created? He doesn't want the answer, wants the silence that edges stumped questions. In our house, God is more furnace than architect. Yesterday, I bought a hatchet at the hardware store for slim branches that are spidering low on our acre, and all I can imagine is it slamming into my thigh. Metal, branch, bone. Soon there will be nubs and shoots, the cold hand of winter lifting. Soon we will have a pile split and stacked for another freeze. My son asks, how was the first tree made? We trace its lineage around the edges, body of my guitar, books, desk where I write, ghosts. From our window, grosbeaks and buntings tangle into flight. The hours count earlier now because of the way they are lit. When my children are grown, will they look into the thicket of poems to find me? L, what splinters have I left that will redden and ache?
Just
I know this one's a real knee
You killed
slapper.
Kate. You've destroyed Kate.
It's a real knee slapper.
It was that was like I just took a sip of water and it went like right down my windpipe, of course. That was not a reaction to the poem at all. Woo!
Kate, just edit yourself out. Get out.
Oh no, keep that. I prefer that response. I think that was beautiful. My husband calls me the rainmaker because people are always crying at my readings. So like I much prefer the like chortle, snort, and laugh.
Gagging and choking. Oh, I love this. And I can't help but think just it, in what you've already read, your brand new collection coming out, and then you have this collaboration, and the common theme here is obviously like correspondence, so do you find when you are corresponding with another writer or a family member, or that sort of unlocks something more in you than if you were doing this like as a solo activity?
Absolutely. I love the idea of the Buddhist like storehouse of consciousness. I read about it once, and it's when you're kind of walking through the world, you're collecting all of this sensory information, all of these sight, sound, images, smells, without realizing it, and it's being stored in somewhere inside of your body. And for me, these letters, this way of correspondence, is a way of unlocking all of that to see what's interconnected or interrelated, and things just come out and they spark. And the poems are richer because of it. It's not just my perspective. I'm responding to something or someone. Whenever I read a poem, I'm always wondering who or what we are responding to, because it feels like that's how we navigate poetry, right? So why not make it a letter poem directly?
I hadn't thought about that kind of connection, Kate, that you brought up as far as your work, Megan, about how there is so much like real meaning and relationship to what you write. And whether you are talking to a poet from the past, or your, like relatives from the past, or even another poet like you are here, there's that real kind of relational aspect to it that I think is really beautiful. Like the lines in this poem, just that really get me. There's a couple, like God is more furnace than architect is a really fascinating line. I think that is just, and I'm thinking about faith and kind of the different things. When you're reading these letters from the past, and I'm not sure if you're a person of faith at all or anything like that, but does your view of faith, did that change when you looked at kind of the Mormonism from your great grandma and that stuff? Did you kind of get a different view of it, or was it kind of reinforced what you already thought about it, or how has that changed for you?
I've always seen spirituality and religion as two separate things that are kind of smushed together. I was raised Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic school for a bit, and it was terrifying. And I kept picking these saints that were like not okay by the church standards when it came time for confirmation. And I was like, no, this one like set things on fire and flew in the rafters. And I'm like, maybe someone more pious. But I've always been an incredibly spiritual human being, and once I kind of freed that container of it, I began to see how present spirituality is in my daily life. And in reading the letters from Hortensia, her devotion was what struck me as actually being incredibly different from my own life, in that her devotion was to God and mine is to creation and art and mothering and all of these things that are an expression of self. And so they are similar in that way, but hers was very regimented and defined, and mine is less. And so I was really intrigued by that.
There's just something really generous in writing these sort of correspondence, like epistolary type poems, that gives the reader, it just sort of feels like a sneak peek into a certain kind of intimacy that that you don't really get with other poetry. So it's just, it's like kind of like the fly on the wall. Michael, you had a collab collection too.
I did. So I have my own Megan, which I did we did a nonfiction epistolary book. And it was one of those things we didn't define who was writing what in the piece. So there's the sense that depending on how well someone knew us as individuals, they would be able to kind of piece out who was writing what. But as far as the audience was, there wasn't really a lot to give away who was saying different things about their past or family. So it made the experience like intimate on different levels. Like people who knew us well would know who was saying what and what our experience was and what we were hinting at but didn't outright say, et cetera, et cetera. So there is that sense of like intimacy when you do collaborations. And especially, I think it's hard for me to trust another writer enough to do collaborations. So that was a big part of that. Do you notice that when you were writing with Luke, as far as that like ability to open up and trust, and was that a difficult part for you personally, or how was the experience of collaborating?
It was beautiful. No, I don't think that we really went over that step. It was just kind of like, boom, here's the wound. What do you have to say back? And we're writing a lot about parenthood, and we had that in common. And so yeah, I think there was just this initial trust. We had one phone conversation. So I saw a post that he had made on Facebook where he was feeling a little stuck after finishing his book. And so I reached out and was like, hey, do you want to do something together? And he's like, sure. And so we arranged this phone conversation, and we spoke maybe all of 5 or 6 minutes about the project, and then just spent the rest of the time talking about awkward poetry encounters and like weird things that we've done in our life. And so that bond was instantly formed. And it was just straight trust from there. But there was one point where I was really struggling to write into a poem for me that was very challenging and very confronting. And I was expressing that to Luke, and he had, reassured me and said, like, hey, I'm going to hold the heavy bag for you and you just punch. And so that for me was such a cool moment of being like, okay, I have someone here willing to hold this space while I try to figure this out, while I throw everything of myself at it, and they're accepting of it, and they're looking at that as art. It helps to have a really, really good writing partner. Luke's work is phenomenal. I've always been a fan. So he brought out the best in me. Like, he really challenged me to show up to the page.
So that is one of the fascinating parts about collaboration, is it really does bring out parts of you. You feel like someone else is almost relying on you in a different way. So it really does. Like, I can fail myself as a poet. I don't really care. That's fine.
Right.
But when someone else is part of that project, you definitely feel a different kind of sense of responsibility, and you really do want to work hard and produce something that they can be happy with too. They become your instant reader, and there's such a different kind of care that comes into it when that happens. Meghan, thank you so much for that, because there were moments that I'm already looking forward to listening to again, because you are so intelligent. And the
Thank
way you
you.
think about writing and just like how you perceive things and how you express things are so unique and smart that I was already writing down little quotes here and there, and I'm already looking forward to like re-listening to you talk. So thank you so much
That's
for
awesome.
being a
And oh,
guest on the show, and just being willing to experiment with us as we kind of fumble our way, and as Kate laughs at your poems.
no, that was an absolutely brilliant response. I loved it. Do not cut that.
This was such a gift, and I'm so excited just for what's next for you. Like, I feel like this next coming year with these books and all of this stuff, it's going to be really great, and it'll be fun to watch. And we're here to support you because now you're family once you come on the show. So
That's right.
We'll be
Awesome.
promoting you as much as we can. And so thank you so much. And I know that we're asking a lot of your time today, so it's we really do appreciate it. But
no, thank you. Yeah, this is my pickleball morning, so normally I'd be out slaying on the courts.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to say goodbye now. But anyways, looking forward to the next part of this conversation, which is our toast or roast, where our guest brings on a poem or sends us a poem from someone out in the wilds for us to look at, and we give it the once over, twice over, 3 times over, and decide whether or not we want to toast or roast it. So look forward to that, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Next time on Table for Deuce.
Let's go for Deuce.
This poem made me really angry.
The number 2 doesn't get enough play.
I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna have 60,000 lovers.
Like take a little drive down Google Avenue every time I get a little confused.
You know nothing.
Why are we talking about number 2?
That's your
I am such a lightweight. I am like a half a beer and then I'm like buzzed.
You're looking down and you're like, you are my second drink. Not another. The other.
His is the second. Mine, I have the Deuce. It's the second.
Yeah.